How long does it take for a prayer to reach the moon? The answer might surprise you. You might think a fraction of a second. When the moon is 93 million miles away, light travels at 186,000 miles a second. So maybe less than a minute anyway, right? How about 26 years? Well, let me explain. About 55 years ago, this last July, the Apollo moon mission was happening. Apollo 11 went to the moon. I had a chance to write an article back in 1993 for Unity magazine, and I was about the prayer for protection. I interviewed James Dillett Freeman, the author of the Prayer for Protection, and I found out that the prayer for protection was being held onto. It was in the suit of Buzz Aldrin, the second person on the moon, when he went to the moon 55 years ago. So from the time that he wrote it, Freeman, in 1943, to the time that it reached the moon, 1969, was 26 years. That was such a powerful, powerful little prayer. The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me. Wherever I am, God is. And Buzz Aldrin treasured that, and he brought it to the moon with him. He was pretty tricky. When they came to land on the moon, they only had like 30 seconds of fuel left for that landing. But they landed, and they made the announcement, the Eagle has landed. See, it had to be the first because there was a pride that this country took in that. They took it personally. The ego of the country had landed. It's not just the eagle had landed, the ego of the country had landed. Now, the ego is our personality. It's who we think we are. It's a sense of self-worth. Maybe you like to have certain brand name products, partly because you believe that they have higher quality, but maybe partly because the name is something that signifies your value. You might have a gold card or a platinum card to do your shopping with. Maybe you go someplace and you've had the opportunity to have VIP seating. Makes you feel really special. It's about the ego. It's okay. We have a human ego. We're allowed to have that. It kind of means that we belong, that we're approved of, because we want to be seen as successful, as important, as valued. The truth is, though, what we are trying to be is so much less than we really are, because we have all that we need to do all that we need to do. Why? Because we are spiritual beings. We are human beings, aware of our spirit, hopefully. But that's the paradox. We are taught to be separate. See, being spiritual beings, having awareness of our human identity is a powerful thing. But being human beings, realizing that we are of spirit, we have a one-to-one connection with God always, is not only uplifting, but allows us to move forward with great confidence, knowing that we can never be alone. We're being constantly directed, lifted, guided. It's kind of a paradox, though, because we have been taught to be separate. I was raised in a more fundamental church than Unity is. And I was taught that we were separate, that we were somehow unworthy. We certainly could not connect with God directly. That was not ours to do. The only opportunity we had was to find an interim, somebody between us and God. And that happened to be a priest, somebody to represent us to God. In ancient times, the priests led the worship. They offered sacrifices on behalf of others. And they had what was called a tent of meeting. They had this large outer tent, and priests could go in there. But only the chief priest could go into the tent of meeting. There was a sacred curtain where he would enter the Holy of Holies. And then it was just one time a year. That's how separate everybody was. The priests were separate from the chief priest. The people were separate from the priests. And we were told who we are and who we were to be. And mainly, it was about not being worthy. That's why we had to give the sacrifices. But yes, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we are human beings having a spiritual experience to the extent of our spiritual awareness. I say often that we cannot become more spiritual. And what I mean by that is that we are all fully spiritual beings. We cannot become more spiritual. We can only become more aware of the truth of who we are, that we are spiritual beings. We can become more aware of our spirituality. We are not separate from God, or for that matter, we're not separate from each other. Now, Jesus was not ego-driven, right? But he did act human from times to times. He was upset with the 12. He would be impatient with them. He would yell at them. Don't you get it? Don't you see what we did? We just fed 3,000, 5,000 people with a couple loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Don't you get it that we are all connected to God? One of the shortest lines, maybe the shortest line in the Bible, is Jesus wept. I think it was when he heard about his friend, good friend Lazarus dying. Of course, he brought him back to life. He had his human frailties, but we never hear him saying human things like, hey, do you think that these sandals go with this robe? Or I might be having a bad hair day. What do you think? Jesus is our demonstration. He's our link to the divine. He said, the things I do, you also will do, and greater things than these, because he knew of the spiritual nature of each person. And he wanted each person to know that spiritual link in themselves. That's why so often when people were healed, he said, your faith has made you well. Because their belief in who they were. So we have two egos. We have a human ego and we have a spiritual ego. And in unity, we speak of them as the personality and the individuality. The personality is like the soul expression, and that can grow and it can diminish as well. You know, people describe other people sometimes as they have a great personality or not so great personality. But that's the outer expression of somebody. Most of the time, people are doing the best they can with what they know, with what they've been taught, with what they believe about themselves. But see, there's an individuality about us as well. And our individuality cannot be changed. It is our spiritual fingerprint. Nobody else is like us. Nobody's like you. They might have a similar personality, but nobody is like you. You're not just your personality. You are so much more. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. or a human being having a spiritual experience to the extent of your awareness. But see, this requires humility. Humility to say, okay, if I am not just all about my personality and trying to be who I think I need to be, then maybe I can be a little bit humble. Humility to me means teachability. Humility comes from humus, which means grounded. I shared the story about how there was a time in my life when I was kind of in between everything. I didn't know what I was going to do. I couldn't find a job that would pay a regular pay. And finally, I just said, okay, if there is such a thing as God, then get me something that's going to pay something for me just showing up and doing my job. And I got a call the next day, and I had a job working for a subsidiary of AT&T. It was part-time, it was temporary, it was hourly wage, but at least it was a job. What I found in that job was the importance of appreciation and surrender. I thought I was better than other people that were also applying for that job. And I realized that that's not so at all. We are one. My opportunity was to be in absolute gratitude for answered prayer. It changed my life. Surrender can change your life. Whatever is going on in your life, choose to give it over to God. Surrender to your highest good, knowing that you are a spiritual being having this human experience. Let's say you're facing a health challenge, financial challenge, or relationship challenge, trying to make some major decisions in your life. It doesn't mean that we don't have the challenges as human beings. What is important for us is to be able to step back and see a bigger picture and know that somehow things can work out to the extent of our ability and willingness to surrender to a higher knowing, to follow our guidance, to feel that presence of God, to feel a comfort, to feel a certain knowing that we are being loved, we are being looked after. I don't want to use anthropomorphic terms necessarily, like being looked after like a god in the sky. But what the energy of the universe seeks is to express through us for our highest good. We just have to get out of our own way. See, the human ego challenges us. And sometimes the challenges are right in front of us and we don't see them. I heard the story about a Sufi mullah named Nasruddin. And this is back in the 13th century, in the 1200s. And he was going from one province to another. And the people who were the border guards were sure that he was smuggling something. So he had this donkey loaded with straw. And when they'd go through, they'd stop him. They'd go through the straw. They said, I know you're smuggling something here. And they couldn't find anything. And they were sure that he was doing something. Well, this went on back and forth for 4 years, and they never could find anything that he was smuggling. They would look through the saddlebags, they'd look through the straw, they look in the mouth of the donkey. They tried to find anything that they could find that he'd be smuggling. This happened for 4 years. Finally, the person who was in charge of all of this retired. And 20 years later, he saw Nasruddin in another town. He said, look, I've retired. I don't have any way to charge you with anything, but I'm so curious. We look through everything when you were moving from one province to another, so we could at least charge you the taxes or something on whatever you were smuggling. What was it you were smuggling? And he said, donkeys. So it was right in front of them. Sometimes our answers are right in front of us. Our challenges sometimes are right in front of us. Where do you feel, for instance, a sense of entitlement? Like this should be yours. This benefit should be yours. You know where it comes from? It comes from comparison to a great extent, and it comes from a concern about not being worthy. This sense of entitlement. You might have seen that in yourself. You might have seen it in others, where because of who they are or the situations they've gone through, they feel entitled to some kind of a benefit. Your ego can get in the way of your spiritual awareness. Another question to ask yourself is simple. When do you need to be right? Being right, everybody wants to be right because it means, well, that they're approved of and that they're strong and that they're clear and that they are bright. But giving up the need to be right is a real gift because it means that we are all teachable. We want to learn to be spiritually aware because it brings peace. It brings inner direction. We want to give up trying to be who we are not because what we are trying to be is so much less than we are. We are spiritual beings. We have an individuality. Another way to say this, kind of comically, is you are unique, just like everybody else. You do have a spiritual ego. It's an ego that's not looking for approval, but awareness, because you want to be able to express your spiritual truth. You are here for a reason. You are here to make a difference in this world. You are here to make a difference in your relationships. You are here to prove that through your spiritual awareness, through listening to your guidance, you can overcome any challenge. You can strive to and reach any goal. What you are trying to be is so much less than you are. You have all you need to do all you need to do. So realize this. Feel your worthiness. Let go of any limited thinking. Live in conscious awareness of God, grounded in humility, in teachability, because then you can safely say, the ego has landed. God bless you.